Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Unraveling Politics. This is a show where I discuss the political news of the day and I provide my analysis in a way you can understand. Today, we're talking about the election results. This time, we're going to be speaking directly about specific numbers. If you want a more overall general trend, I recommend you check out the last episode. So let's get right into it. I brought Joe back onto the show. He's always very good at the numbers and stuff. So enjoy. Okay, so enough votes have been counted. I mean, they're still counting votes, but I think we have enough votes to determine kind of the overall picture of the electorate, right? I mean, that seems good to me. We're now more than 2 weeks, or actually, we're almost 3 weeks out. No, we're 2 weeks out.
2 weeks.
We're
Yeah.
yeah, what am I talking about? We're 2 weeks out. So I think the order we're going to do this episode is we're going to start with the president. That's what most people care about, and then we're going to go to the Senate and then the House, and then maybe there'll be anything left over at the end. So what I have some exit poll numbers here that I got from Meet the Press. They compare 2012 to 2024. The reason why they picked 2012 was that was the last election before Trump was the Republican nominee. And they noted that before that in 2012, Democrats, their strongest base were people that were under 30. I mean, some of this might still be the case. Under 30, that made less than 50,000 and they had no college degree. So that would be for under 30, Democrats had a 23-point advantage. For if you made under 55 $50,000 a year, it was a 22-point advantage. And if you had no college degree, it was a 4-point advantage. Now, it's been 12 years. Democrats have only an 11-point advantage for those under 30. The Republicans are up three with those under 50, making under 50,000, and now Republicans are leading by 14% on people that have a college degree. So to sum that up, that is a 12, 25, and 18-point swing. And then if you're looking at race, their Republicans have made swings across the board. Black voters, they've had a 15-point swing, Hispanic voters a 38-point swing, and Asian voters a 32-point swing. And then where Democrats have made gains is when they didn't really make that many, is among white people, a 4-point swing, college educated, a 9-point swing, and then making over 100,000, a 15-point swing. So that's kind of where we're at right now. You definitely made it your right points a while ago about we're seeing racial depolarization. A lot
Yep.
less, it's not nearly as clear. Before, it was very easy to say, okay, if somebody's black, they're probably voting Democrat. If they're Asian, they're probably voting Democrat. If they're poor, they're probably voting Democrat. Or if they're college educated, they're probably voting Republican. But now that has clearly changed.
Yeah, I mean, the smallest gains were with black voters for sure. I think the more notable things that turnout was lower. Black turnout was lower. And I think that
Mm,
was largely anticipated. I think it was maybe more realistic to see black people not turn out as much rather than actually vote for Trump. Um, and that makes some intuitive sense, I think. And that's basically what we saw play out. Like the margin was, probably like 2, 3 points better for Trump, but it was really that the turnout was down. The gains of Hispanics were big. One thing to note also when comparing from 2012 to 2024 is there was a 6 point national difference. So
yeah.
you have to, so like a 6 point swing to Republicans with any group is kind of the same as it staying the same because
Democrats did a lot better in
they
2012.
did a lot. They just did better across the board, and that's kind of the story across about this election is a lot of the expectations with demographics and whatnot were basically came to pass. And the reason Trump won is just that the overall environment was favored the Republicans, which not too hard to understand.
Hmm.
Trump, his unpopularity certainly dragged him down. We'll have plenty to talk about that department in a minute, but basically this was just a matter of Democrats not having particularly popular stewardship of the country over the past 4 years, and people took it out on him with their votes. So that's basically what we saw across the board this year. And the demographic swings that made it up were pretty much what we would expect if you had said that Republicans would, win the popular vote by a point and a half.
which it looks like they did. I mean, right now we're at 50.1% to 48.3%. What I will note though is none of the swings are less than 6%. All the lowest one is 12. So they are real swings. Like they're not.
Oh yeah. No, yeah, well, especially from 2012, that's a bigger time disparity, and we've seen a lot of change, uh, not just from 2020 to 2024, but the last two elections as well have seen a decent bit of change under the hood, even though they were all close. Well, just the last two were extremely close. This one was close too. Um, but yeah, you definitely especially when you compare to 2012, you see big differences with white college educated, high income, basically all the stuff you talked about, and then the minority shifting more
Mhm,
Republican. I think, maybe some of that could be attributed to Obama being like a sort of a once in a lifetime talent, and maybe being the first black president helped him with all kinds of minority groups and stuff. I think that's fairly possible. But also like we're seeing more voting along like economic lines and class lines rather than racial lines, which I think
mhm.
definitely made a big difference this time with like Hispanic voters and the economy and even the border being a big issue for them rather than identity politics. It seems like the era of identity politics is winding down, which I think is mostly
Definitely.
a good thing.
Yeah, me
Um,
too.
but yeah, so the racial depolarization definitely came to pass. Most polling, whether they showed Harris or Trump winning, basically showed racial depolarization. Um, as far as, one thing I think that some people might misconstrue a little bit is that this is not really a blowout win. Um, Trump
Yeah.
winning the popular vote is somewhat significant, I would say. I think we're kind of grading on a curve here that winning the popular vote by like point and a half is a huge win. It's really not. It's just that he did so poorly in it the last two times that he kind of has a, different benchmark, sort of like how you know, they would sometimes grade Biden's performances on a curve based on his, you know, usual stuttering and whatnot, when he was getting ready to drop out of the campaign. But, really we're seeing like the tipping point state was Pennsylvania, it was not Wisconsin. I was slightly off about that. Trump only won Wisconsin by 0.9%, a little less than 1 point, and he won Pennsylvania by about 1.8%. So that was the tipping point. So if Harris had done 2 points better, she would have won. That's basically the story here. So basically, it was a 2 point victory, little less, point and a half, depending on how you went around it, and it's a close race where the fundamentals matter, the economy and the incumbent party being unpopular.
If Harris had done 2 points better, then she would have gotten 50.3% of the popular vote and Trump 48.1%. So you think like that still would have been a cl very
Well, no,
close
I mean like 2 points better in margin. So it would be her
Right.
winning 49.3, him winning 49. It'd basically be like a half point win in the popular vote and like a less than half point win in Pennsylvania and Michigan and Wisconsin. So,
Oh, I see what you mean. Okay.
um, yeah, now I do think the popular it's ticking like Trump is going to end up just a little under 50%. The margin's going to trim down just slightly as the last little bits of California come in. Um, but we are almost all of the votes in at this point. We're very close to being done. And for most practical purposes, we are done, except for two House races, which we'll talk about in a moment.
We'll talk about it more. What one last thing? Well, there's a lot we could talk about the presidential election, but what I'll throw out there, and I remember on election night we were texting back and forth, and I was texting my more liberal friends, and we were seeing these big swings from Democrat to Republican, and I kept hearing red mirage, red mirage, red mirage. And then I texted you. I was like, "Well, is this a red mirage?" And you said no, because we had seen in the early states like Kentucky, Indiana, Tennessee,
Yeah, Indiana was a big one.
Wisconsin. We we
Um,
we were seeing
he-
these in counties that were already done voting. They had had huge swings already.
yeah, well, so Indiana actually didn't swing that much to the right overall, but a good county we were watching is Hamilton County, which is like a suburb of Indianapolis, pretty wealthy. It swung a lot from Trump to Biden in 2020. And basically what we were seeing is Trump won it by 7 in 2020. And then the first votes came in, Harris was up like 1 point. Like, well, that was okay, but it was the early vote. And then slowly, 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 the margin went all the way back to Trump plus 6. So she did just like 1 point better than
Yeah,
last time.
she
And,
did point
it
seven
did
better.
what, and, once it got to like 80, 90% in, we could see like, okay, Trump's gonna do like, like what, like 2 points worse and end up being 1 point worse. That's enough, given that he's gonna do better in like the rural areas and stuff. That was like a big red flag. Um, Florida is red. I wasn't surprised by that. He won it by a little less than Marco Rubio did in 2022. It looks like a 13-point margin. I think it was like 15 in 2022. So that 13 was right around where I was expecting. Texas ended up being a pretty wide margin, and that was another big red flag. Like Houston and Dallas, the cities and the suburbs mostly swung to the right, even though they historically trended left. So that was another big indicator. And then I think I called Georgia and North Carolina around like 11 o'clock. So those count fast. And like I said, if Harris wins one of those, she's definitely ahead. And if she wins both, then it's basically over. Well, Trump won both by a relatively small margin, which was another one of my predictions that his performance in the Southeast will be somewhat weak compared to, the overall picture. So that basically came to pass. And if we want to go into a little bit like the overall, like the way states moved, Washington State looks to be like perhaps Harris's best. She's basically doing like the same as 2020. And then like if you go down the list, like the next like three or four best states for Harris compared to 2020 are just all the swing states. Like it's like Georgia, North
Yeah.
Carolina, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. Michigan was a little bit of a bigger swing. It's interesting that Michigan voted to the right of Wisconsin. That was a little bit unusual. Maybe the Arab stuff was a little bit of a factor. I don't know that was really the decisive thing since, they were able to win. He was able to win all the other swing states. So I don't think it was decisive, and the margin wasn't tiny, tiny. It was about 80,000 votes. So that wasn't the whole reason that he won, but probably contributed to the margin a little bit. And then Trump ran it up in the Southwest, which I expected him to run away with Arizona. Nevada's a little closer. Trump did better than I was expecting, but still he ran strong with the Hispanics in the Southwest, and that's really was his biggest opportunity to grow. And it looks like he was able to capitalize on that because you saw the same thing in Texas, basically with the Hispanics, and that just extended to Arizona and Nevada pretty similarly.
And with that, I mean, I'll throw in there. I think, I don't know. I can't stop thinking about how close New Jersey was. New Jersey's not a swing state. It's supposed to be a safe state, and Kamala only won by 6%. And
Yeah.
that might be because of
Um,
Hispanics that are
it's definitely because of the Hispanics. Actually, I was looking at it, and this will bring me into kind of my next point is that Trump didn't do very well in the swing states. That sounds kind of weird since he won them all,
Yeah,
but
there was
like
not a big swing to him in those swing
there's
states.
not a big swing to him in the swing states. Like I said, like other than Washington State, Um, and Colorado swung a little bit more to the right than some of the others, so that actually wasn't like too good for Harris. It was comparatively not too bad. Like she still won it by 11 points, I think, and won it by 13, so 2 points isn't so big. But compared to the national picture, that's a pretty good margin for her. But the reason you saw New Jersey swing so much is because of the Hispanics in northeast New Jersey, basically the
Hmm.
areas near New York City mainly. But the reason that Trump didn't do better there is because he actually did pretty poorly in the suburbs. And the reason what you saw is that
Yeah,
in
he
the
didn't
South
really.
Jersey suburbs, which are historically, kind of competitive, and the Republican gubernatorial candidate in 2021, who came within, I think, 3 points, he did really, really well there. Trump did not do very well. And the reason I think is part of that is that it's in the Philadelphia advertising television market. So if you watch the Eagles games or the Phillies games, both of which were, big in October, November, and September, the people in South Jersey were getting the same ads as the people in
Mhm.
Philadelphia and,
And
and the
we
and the suburbs of Philadelphia. And Philadelphia's getting pounded with ads during the election season.
and
And
and we and we in Philadelphia, I know because we I don't live in Philadelphia, but I'm from the Philadelphia area. We get pounded with Jersey ads, so it really like I kept
yeah,
getting
well, it's
Andy Kim
all the
was
same market.
yeah when
Yeah,
Andy
so
Kim
you
was running
can't
for
buy one
Congress,
without the other.
he would pound us with his ads. So
Yeah.
it
And
really
so that goes along with my point is that um Trump's unpopularity weighed him down in the swing states. He's doing 6 points better nationally, but most other than the Southwest, where he did very well,
It was not
Uh,
a 6 point swing in the swing
it was
states.
not a 6 point in Georgia. It was a 2 point swing. North Carolina was a 2 point swing. Pennsylvania's like a 3 point swing. Wisconsin is a 1.5 swing. And Michigan was a little bigger. I want to say like 4 or 5 points. So that one wasn't so bad. But those three were definitely weaker. And especially if you like ice if the 6 points is kind of the average of the swing states and the non-swing states. I think if you isolate them, it's like the swing states were like a 3 point swing and the non-swing states were like a 7 point swing. Um, so that
That's
definitely
why he was
shows you
able to
that
win the popular
the
vote.
campaign mattered a little bit, and especially in like an interesting point is that in the suburban Milwaukee, Trump did very poorly. He did like 2 points worse in 2020, where there really weren't very many areas in the whole country where Trump did more than just tiny bit worse. He did worse in parts of Atlanta and Georgia. I think was o overall worrying for the long term, like the next, maybe the next election. I think it's going to be tough for the Republicans to win Georgia because for Trump to only win it by like 2 points in a very strong environment. You know, his kind of version of the Republican Party is not very well built for the Southeast, I think, like Georgia and North Carolina. So those are going to be
Yeah.
very competitive states. And I think as we'll get to, there's going to be a Senate race in North Carolina in 2026 that will be very, very competitive. Um, so, Trump, I'll just say he's a bad candidate. I mean, if you want to win, he's not really the right guy. But, the national picture was such that almost any Republican could win, and he was close enough to any Republican that he was able to win.
Yeah, I know. I mean, he's not a great candidate. I'm sorry out there, anyone who likes him, but you can like him, but understand he's not popular across the
Yeah,
country.
he's not popular. He's just not.
And that's going to bode problems, as I will talk about in the coming weeks and months, in the midterms in 2 years and whatever, and any special elections that happen in between. I do have a few numbers, and this will be the last thing I say about the presidential election. And then if you have anything else you say, you can say it, or we'll move on to the Senate. But New York, 11 point swing. California, about 11 point swing. Although that's a couple days ago old, so it could be a little bit less. New Jersey, 11 point swing. Massachusetts, 9 point swing. Maryland, 9 point swing. Illinois, 8 point swing, all to Republicans.
Yep. And
So,
part of that goes towards the idea that, Trump hasn't have a very good coalition for winning because he still gets zero electoral votes in all those states.
hmm well, I'll
Um,
just throw out there Nebraska's second congressional district. Democrats only won by like 4 or 5%. They should have won by 8 or 10.
yeah. Yeah, oh yeah, definitely. Well, I think that's just the national environment, I think, because yeah, I think it's like 4 points, and Biden won it by six. So actually, that's really not that bad, even though I was expecting her to win it by more. But still, I don't think any Trump Trump-like Republican will be winning that district anytime soon.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, no, I mean she didn't do that good in the suburbs, and that's why she lost. Um, Trump is unpopular in the suburbs, but he just was doing well enough across the board that it kind of the tide swept over despite his flaws. And but overall, like the coalition that he's assembled is very like inefficient, in
Mm-hmm.
part because of the safe states, like I mentioned, in part because they don't turn out for midterms very much. I personally, I will say, I find it very odd for this to not have happened in 2022, but to happen now with Trump on the ballot. Like, because clearly he was the drag in both elections, but I just find it kind of funny and really a little odd that, it didn't really come to pass. Maybe it was the recency effect of the Dobbs decision. I mean, I'm sure that was part of it, with
Yeah,
given
I'm
that
sure.
these results. But it is a little bit weird the way that voters decide like now is the time to punish the Democrats with Trump on the ballot when it didn't happen in 2022. But
Well,
that's
I
just
know
kind of
that
a sidebar.
the Trump like it seems like Trump when you have a Trumpy candidate they lose but Trump himself is fine. Like I remember Scott Wagner was running for he was either running for governor or for Senate in Pennsylvania in 2018.
I
He
think
was
he
running
ran for governor.
yeah, okay, yes, he ran for governor. Yeah, it was Lou Barletta that ran for Senate. And
Yeah,
he was running a Trump-like campaign in Pennsylvania and got blown out. Like it was not even close. It
yeah,
was for like 10%. You could say that was partly because we had a popular Democratic governor. You could say it was a blue wave, but in the midterms, which it was, but it was not even close. Like it was
yeah. Well,
like we
well,
were
Trump imitators do very poorly, and we saw that with Kerry Lake, who managed to run like 7 points worse than Trump in Arizona.
oh yeah, and
We'll
this is a
get to
perfect
the Senate
segue.
in a moment. But
That's a perfect
I'll just
segue.
say that I think part of it is a little bit that like people are less likely to like split their ticket for the presidential race. Like it's a very polarizing thing, whereas the people are like, yeah, I won't vote for the crazy person for Senate. But for president, it's tough to get partisan people to switch. So those might be some factors, but the Trump, you know, whole strategy really is not very sustainable or reliable in general. But yeah,
Yeah.
with that, we'll move on to the Senate.
Yeah, now that he won't be running again, for sure.
Yeah, that's right.
He's done unless he wants to be governor of Florida or something. He's done. So, and even then,
Yeah.
he'll still win. So he win that. And as for the Senate, I mean, Democrats did they did I was gonna say they
I
did a
think they
little
did
worse than I
fine.
expected.
Um, Obviously, this was a good night for Republicans, all else being equal. So it wasn't like great, but you know what? I think if we had gone back 2 years, um, and said, the Democrats would lose 4 seats on this map, they wouldn't be too upset by that. They probably might have guessed Arizona would have flipped, not Pennsylvania. But
Yeah.
other than that, I think that's pretty much played out as you might have expected. Ohio, it wasn't super close, but it was competitive. Basically if Harris had won, probably would have been like a 1 point race. Um, uh, Sherrod Brown lost his seat by like 4 points. And then McCormick won a very narrow race in Pennsylvania.
He's currently leading by 17,000 votes, which
Yeah.
he has
Um,
refused to concede the race, Bob Casey, so we'll have to see.
yeah, well, he's nuts. But
The Associated Press has already called the race. They called it.
everybody's called the race except for the people who like are just sometimes they won't call it literally because the candidate won't concede if it's like close at all. But for the people who aren't, not calling it just because he's basically contesting the election, th this race is over. It's been for a while. They counted all the provisional ballots in Philadelphia and all that, and it wasn't enough. So it
Yep.
was called, and it was called correctly. Democrats squeaked out a win in Michigan. Wisconsin wasn't too much better. I think both of those were less than 1 point. Nevada was like a little over a point. Let's see, almost 2 points it looks like. And then Arizona was a somewhat comfortable, not as comfortable as it, maybe could have been, but given the environment, Ruben Gallego winning by two, pretty good performance against a horrendous candidate who was
Hmm.
basically guaranteed to lose. I mean,
Somebody,
to run behind Trump by 7 in a red state is pretty pathetic.
though Trump, well, I don't know if I call Arizona, it's a former red state, but what I'll say
But
is
red leaning.
red
I mean,
leaning,
more
yes.
Republican than like Michigan. So I
Yes.
would say that.
Like, yeah, definitely more red leaning. Like, she should have done, like, it should have been like 2 or 3 points behind, maybe even less.
If that, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's obviously we're deep into hypotheticals here, but yeah, in theory, I don't see it's an open seat too. That's the thing that, the Democratic incumbents ran ahead. That's not too crazy. But, for an
Hmm.
open seat, it's pretty weak.
Yeah.
It was almost as if it was almost as if Gallagher was the incumbent because, his opposition was so feeble. But
Yeah, I'm telling you, Carrie, somebody asked me on election night, I'm not going to say her name. She asked me, one of my family members, do you think she really liked Carrie Lake? Do you think Carrie Lake is going to win? And I said, no. And she said, why? I said, because she's crazy.
yeah, she's just crazy. Nothing else to be said there. Just,
Hmm.
crazy people usually lose. Um,
Usually.
yeah, usually.
And
Unless
then,
it's a very safe state.
unless they're
And
very,
like
well, Marjorie Taylor
even
Greene,
then
she's still in the
sometimes
Senate.
not.
So, I
Yeah.
mean, more, and then Montana, that was I mean, the
Eight
polls were about right.
points.
8 points. That was the,
Yeah, I think that's pretty much what you would expect. Yeah, I think assuming if you had known that Trump would win, I think 8 points is about right. Um, you know,
for our viewers at
Texas ended up
home.
being not that close.
Democrats flipped West, or Republicans flipped West Virginia. That was a given. Montana, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. So
Yep.
that's our
Yep.
that's the roundup there. I mean, is there any? It's going to be very. I mean, the only thing I have to say, it's going to be very difficult for them to take the Senate in 2026. There's really not.
Yes, that's
Or,
correct. So especially with winning Pennsylvania, and Ohio too, really. I think probably even if they had lost Pennsylvania, it's quite hard to see the Democrats. Well, actually, no, Pennsylvania makes a difference. And I'll explain why is that. The two biggest targets that Democrats have in 2026 are Maine and North Carolina. Um, Maine is obviously a blue state, but Susan Collins is very popular, so that's no gimme, but it's a close that's a competitive race to be. She said she'll run again, so that should be a competitive race. We'll see how that shakes out. And then North Carolina, they should have a very competitive race, in a state that's not super red anymore. And the incumbent senator is a powerful person, but he's not like electorally super strong.
Who is the
Um,
American senator there?
Tom
Tom
Tillis.
Tillis. Yep.
Yeah.
He was supposed to lose in
So
2020, but he didn't.
yeah, some people thought he would lose. I didn't think he would lose, but
Same as
that'll be a very competitive race. I mean most midterms, if you maybe started following recently, I dare say you might have a skewed perspective, but midterms usually are pretty rough for the incumbent party. 2022 was definitely an outlier.
hmm
And even so, Republicans still were able to win the House, although that's not much of an accomplishment. But
Yeah, and
really,
like 2018 was I mean,
2018 was really bad. 24, every
2014
from
was bad.
2000,
2010 was really bad.
2010 was really
2006.
bad. 2006 was really bad. Um,
2002 was another exception. So basically,
that was
most
like kind of unusual. That was like the 9/11 bump thing. So like, if there's like a huge events, and I guess, the abortion would be the Dobbs decision, maybe it'd be the equivalent, but it takes a lot for, to avoid if not a wipeout, like a very clear loss in a midterm. So,
mhm. And
um, yeah.
so
So
we're,
I would
we're
expect Republicans to have some trouble. Oh, and so let's get back to control. So if they flip Maine and North Carolina, that would give them 49. And remember, they actually need 51 because the tiebreaker is Republican, the
Democrats,
vice
by the way.
president. Yes, the
Democrats
Democrats
would
would
need
need
50.
51.
So they need two
Um,
more.
so the next best chance is probably Ohio, which will have a special election for Vance's soon to be vacated seat. Um, the governor, Mike DeWine, is a fairly normal Republican. I think the two most likely people to get appointed are either Jane Timken or Matt Dolan, both of who are like normal Republicans, although they will still have to run in a primary, so it's not a guarantee that just because they're appointed they'll win. Um, Luther Strange might have something to say about that. He was from Alabama and lost to the infamous Roy Moore, who managed to lose the seat to the Democrats
In
in the special
Alabama,
election in Alabama. Um, but if, for example, Vivek Ramaswamy were to be the nominee, seat would probably be in serious jeopardy. S- uh, Soon to be former Senator Sherrod Brown could run again, and that would be, he lost, but it was pretty close considering how Ohio voted for Trump by 11. It will not be an R plus 11 environment in Ohio in 2026. So
mhm.
so they might have a shot in Ohio. Still Republicans have, some advantage, but could be a close race. That would be the next best opportunity. But beyond that, we're really getting into reach states.
Yeah,
The next best, I think, would probably be Alaska, assuming Mary Peltola, who we'll get into the House in a minute, but she has lost her seat and to representing the whole state of Alaska in the House. So I would assume she'll run for Senate against Dan Sullivan, the incumbent.
yeah, that would
She
be it.
might run for the House again, I guess, but I would be surprised if she doesn't just run for Senate. It's the same. It's the whole state for both of them, so I feel like she might as well try. I'd be kind of surprised if she didn't. Um, and then
Yeah, and
other than
then
that, Texas maybe, but probably not because Cornyn, the incumbent, is more popular than Cruz, rightfully so. He's just a pretty normal standard Republican. And like I said, Cruz won by like 9 points, and Texas was overall redder than expected this time. Iowa, I don't. Florida's not up, so really, there's not. We're really getting into reach states. Kansas, I guess, would be the next one. So they would have to win a very red state, because Republicans got to 53. So Republican controlled the Senate is very likely throughout the Trump term. The Houses will be a different story. But by winning Pennsylvania and Ohio, they've pretty much they've given themselves a very high chance to maintain the majority in the next
mhm.
election in the Senate.
Yeah, it's going to be difficult. I mean, even the really Democrats have no easy states left to pick off at this point. Neither do
Definitely.
Republicans.
Well, Maine, but
Yeah,
Maine's not easy, but like it's so Republicans have flipped all like the safe. red state senators. The Senate map has been almost completely polarized, where only the swing states are represented by senators of both parties.
Hmm.
Um, well, some swing states are represented by two Democrats, some by just North Carolina by two Republicans, but two Democrats in Wisconsin, Michigan, no, not Wisconsin, excuse me, Michigan,
And
Nevada,
Arizona.
Arizona,
Yeah.
Georgia, um, two Republicans in North Carolina, then Pennsylvania, Wisconsin are split now. But other than that, and Maine, um, basically all the safe states has been picked off, which was probably a long time coming to a certain extent. Um,
Many years to the making because a lot
yeah,
of the
many years in the
senators,
making.
a lot of the
A bunch of them
senators that,
lost in 2018.
and some,
Um,
they all held on in
Colorado in
2012.
2020. Colorado flipped in 2020.
Many,
Um,
yeah, many of these senators that won in, like John Tester first won a seat in 2006.
this map, this 2024 map, had been up for three blue waves in a row. 2012 wasn't really a blue wave, but it was still like Democrats did well. So it wasn't like a red cycle. This was the first red cycle since 2000, which even then is not really that red, that this map was up. So that's why Democrats held so many seats here and had so many vulnerable seats, like Ohio and West Virginia and Montana.
Yeah,
Um,
Democrats were finally washed away. So,
yep. And really, it wasn't a blowout. I mean, if like it really could have been worse. I think if you know someone other than Donald Trump were the Republican nominee, we might have seen Wisconsin, Michigan, and Nevada go 1 point more Republican and flip. In which case, Democrats would have a very hard time winning the Senate for
really, for
maybe the rest
six
of this
years.
decade.
Yeah.
Um, so they kind of avoided the disaster, but they're probably not going to win the majority. And the way the Senate works, right now, it's just slightly more advantageous to the Republicans, and that will not last forever. It never does, but right now, that's just the boat we're in for maybe the next 5, 10 years.
Yeah. Makes sense to me.
Yep.
Now we have a little bit of time left. We can talk about the House. I think how many seats are we at declared at this moment? Is it
Uh,
214 to
I th
220? Or is it
I believe it's 220 Republican,
to
um,
two?
to 215 Democrat. Let me double check.
Because that would be every seat called. I
Oh,
mean,
okay, so then it's that minus two. So okay, so 220 to 213. So the two districts that are uncalled are, I know the districts, I don't remember the total, but California's 13th and 45th. California is horrendously slow. It's truly a disgrace, but they're still counting.
as of
Um
this moment, California's 45th is completely tied. There's a 40,
yep,
40 votes
the
separate the Democrat from the Republican.
yep.
And
So
then
that seat is, I'll just say, very likely to go Democratic. He's basically, it was about 2 points like a week ago, and it's been slowly trending all the way down. So it would be shocking if he were not to pull ahead by more than 30 or 40 votes, with the last 5 or 10% to come in.
well, he
Um,
has pulled ahead. He is ahead now.
right,
So
so he's ahead by like 30 or 40 votes right now, and with the last few percent that come in, he will pull ahead more. There's really, it's hard to imagine the Republicans holding on there, even though it will be very close. So I would expect that one to go Democrat until proven otherwise. And the 13th district is much more up in the air. Republicans are up by 1.2%. It's like 2,000 votes. It's a low turnout district. There's only like 180,000 votes total, which is like because it's like a rural Hispanic heavy district. That's just the way Central California is. Um, so that's a very close race. The Democrat has been slowly gaining. And I've heard some people say that, Democrats are favored there, but the Republican hasn't been as clearly clearly and consistently dropping like they have in the 45th. So
it's
that's the
a
true
close
toss
call.
up, I think. Yeah. So I would expect 220 or 221 Republican seats. So they will have lost one or two seats, which is pretty poor, to be honest,
Considering
given the
how well they
environment.
did nationally.
Yeah, I think that kind of goes back to how the Trump coalition isn't very like effective in like swing states and swing districts. They squeaked by like 1 point in two Pennsylvania districts. That's going to prove critical, and there will be appointments from the House to the Trump admin that basically make this like a probably like a two vote majority in practice. So basically, so almost almost any one defection would mean and there could be special elections. There will be vacancies. So really, oh, the House is almost tied. Johnson will probably be elected speaker at the start, but might not last. So
Yeah, he might not survive the full
it will
term.
be a very chaotic House yet again. Almost the same composition as last time. Maybe well, it will
It'll
be at
be
least one
narrower.
seat closer, if not two seats closer than last time, plus all the vacancies from the appointments. So the House will be very close. Democrats are heavy favorites to win it back in 2026. They just need like two seats, maybe three, depending on exactly how the special elections shake out. They'll have a number of targets in California that they're losing narrowly, especially if like the 13th goes red. They'll probably win it next time for Democrats. There's a bunch of seats that they lost by, like a point or so that they'll be very competitive in. I would probably say they'll probably flip back three seats in Pennsylvania. Maybe the 8th district might be tough if Matt Cartwright doesn't run again. But the 7th and the 10th districts in Pennsylvania will probably flip back. Um, there's plenty of other seats out there that they'll be able to win. The seats are very gerrymandered these days, so there probably won't be a massive swing, but Democrats are clearly favored to win back control. Um, Next time just because it's going to be a midterm and the majority is almost non-existent to begin with. Um,
Democrats gained 40 seats in 2018, but the maps were different then, and I would be shocked if they gained more than 20, because of how old.
yeah, I mean, I can definitely, pick some out that I expect to flip, but just the gerrymanders, especially when they're like somewhat freshly gerrymandered, since they literally redrew the maps like 3 years ago. Towards the end of the decade, you might see some of them start to falter a little more, but the gerrymanders are still pretty strong. And there's just only so much room for either party to win a big majority right now.
Hmm. Yeah, well, that's the story. I mean, it's going to be interesting next 2 years, very chaotic.
Yeah, probably pretty chaotic. Um,
So,
yeah,
so if anyone's
small
looking
small
forward,
majorities.
now is the time to start following politics, really, after the election. Just because the election stops doesn't mean that. I mean, it's less intense in a way, but doesn't
Yeah, it
mean
is less intense.
it doesn't mean
But
that
the
now.
the next election basically begins like the week after once all the big states are finalized.
Yeah, the next election begins soon. So, okay, well, we
Yep.
got a minute left. Is there anything else you have to add? I don't have anything else to add.
Nope, I think we basically
I
said what
think
needs to be said.
Yeah, I think we covered it all. So, well, thanks for coming back on. I hope to have you on very soon.
Hmm.
Again, whenever the time comes, we'll have to see what happens. It's going to be an interesting two
Yep.
years. I hope you enjoyed that episode, and please tune in next week. We might have an episode, we might not. I have not decided yet because it'll be the week before Thanksgiving. But if we do, please tune in. We're probably going to be talking about some of Trump's cabinet picks. Yeah, we'll go from there. So have a great day. Bye bye.